Everything you need is already inside of you. The world would not be what it is without you. When we begin to create change within us, we begin to create change in the world around us. Your journey to becoming your best self as the whole person starts right now.
Hello, hello. I'm Lauren Sweeney, your host of the Become Your Best podcast and webinar series. I'm delighted to have our guest here today. Her name is Sophie Chiche, and she's from Arizona, but French, and we could even do this podcast in Spanish, so we may shock you today. Let me tell you a little bit about Sophie. She has earned her master's degree in business and journalism, and she's a native from Paris, and has added a psychology soon after moving to Los Angeles. All right. She is most known for her recent venture. We're going to talk about that today. Becurrent. She teaches productivity as a gateway to purpose, something the culture knows much about. She comes to it with a unique blend gathered over 30 years of building teams, writing books, running companies, coaching peak performers, and raising children. Her new book, War at a Piece of Cake, I love that, will be out in spring of 2022. When she's not writing or coaching or teaching, she is free-forming dancing in a burgundy tutu or riding her Harley, maybe on PCH when she comes to visit us in Los Angeles. I absolutely love that. Sophie, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you. I loved having you say that because I almost imagine it's not my life, and I listen and I'm like, wow, that's a cool life. It is my life.
Oh, I love it. Well, talk to me about the work you're doing today and a little bit even about your book. And I love the productivity hacks. And before the podcast, we were talking a little about, the starkness in the cultures, even from France. How long did you live there?
I left when I was about 25. So my adult life, my working life has been more here in the States, but we were just shortly talking about how they live better. They have longer lunches and they have 5-week vacations from the second they start, and they have insurance, and it's like something about the French culture, which I don't want to live there. I don't miss it. But I have to say, there's something about how the human is protected a little bit. Here there's a little more of an energy of push and more and not necessarily ever slow down. So I'm kind of, maybe that's why I end up in the business of teaching people how to live lives that are a little bit more aligned, from having somehow been raised there.
I love that. Even just from my grand knowledge and watching Emily in Paris on Netflix, even the starkness in what time you come into work, there's no 7 a.m. And then the longer lunches, like you said, and yet things still happen and things still take place. And so much that, we do have listeners all over the world, Liz, who listen to the podcast, but since you and I are here in the United States, there's something about that. So now talk to me about the work you do in productivity. Well, I hear such a values alignment too. Give us some life hacks around that. I love that.
So productivity is often understood as, do more, accomplish, check off all these boxes by the end of the day. And my experience from having worked with hundreds, probably thousands of people by now, there is always this disconnect, often, not always, but there often is a disconnect between doing all these things, but not always making sure that they actually are connected to what matters to you. And so people will do and do and do and do, but they end up not very satisfied, not very fulfilled, because the doing of it is not really what's going to give them that. And so the work I do does both. There is a work around, how do you actually organize yourself, and how do you make sure your tasks are clear when you start your day, so you don't spend half of your morning identifying what needs to be done, but rather start, with like a clarity of that. But really the work comes in with the underlying reasons why maybe you are a procrastinator. Maybe you don't achieve what matters to you. Maybe you keep avoiding and you keep kind of the bar a little bit low compared to what you would like to do with your life. And that's why I loved your introduction, the little video we watched, because there was really this sense of like, go have a big life. And a lot of people don't, call it, sometimes they don't feel like they deserve that life. And so they play it safe and they don't even take the risk to go have a bigger life, because God forbid if they tried and they missed it. So I think my work was born out of being an entrepreneur for years, and I've built houses and I've worked with teams, and I've done, I've done a good amount. Some people track my professional journey as a little bit erratic, maybe. I don't, because I was always inspired to the next thing, and I followed my intuition and my desires. And when I met people I was interested in, I somehow organized so that we would do more together. But there's definitely always has been this interest in, like, how do I actually do what I say I want to do? How do I move my own needle, like writing a book or starting a company or learning how to ride a Harley or whatever it is? How do I actually go from wanting to do it and doing it? And how do I close this gap? I would say my work is there in that gap of, because I don't know what life you want to live, but I can see if you're not living the one you want to live, like, how do we close that gap?
I love that, living in the gap. So where do you start? Let's say somebody's listening and they're thinking, yes, Sophie, yes, that's me. I have the idea, or I have the dream, or especially in the new year, 2022. What's a good first step to closing the gap? I'm sure there's many steps on this road.
No, I love your question. It's funny because I'm sitting in a room that has a lot of closets in front of me and cabinets, and it gave me this image of spring cleaning a little bit. Like, how do you know what's even in the closets of your mind and of your thoughts? Yeah. And so the first step, I would say, and maybe spring is in a few months, so let's start with more of a January kind of cleaning. But what is in the closet? Like, what's traveling in your mind? What are I often see people have a lot of ideas, but it almost like the visual is a pinball machine in their head, dum, 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 dum. And it's like it doesn't translate into, and what do I do tomorrow morning to actually write this book, or organize this trip, or leave this relationship, or start this relationship, or change my job, or whatever people might be interested in doing. So the first step probably for me would be like, let's do an audit of what's actually there. Yeah. It could be as simple as, take a piece of paper and a pen and just like freeform write, all these things that are floating up there. And let's look at them from, the way you would if you spring clean, when you spring clean your closet, and we look at the house and we say, all right, do I like this vase? Is this thing working? Do I want more of it, less of it? And then start to organize in relation to what brings you joy. Like, a lot of people organize their lives around what they think they should do.
Yes.
So again, there is a big gap there. I guess I love this notion of gap because it is in that space. Like, if I want to write a book, but I don't sit down and write the book, I'm not writing a book. If I want to be healthier, but I go to bed at 3 a.m. and I drink all this coffee and I do all this sugar and I do all these things, that are so not aligned with being healthy, there is a misalignment, right? Mm-hmm. So either, like, sometimes I work with people and they describe their dream or where they want to go, but they have zero willingness to, other than maybe hiring me, which is not enough. It's like once you do the work, you start taking steps toward changing your habits, because otherwise you're going to get, I know it's a cliche a little bit, but it's like, if you keep doing exactly what you're doing, it's a bit insanity to think that you're going to get different results, right? And so that I would identify what wants to be, and I would start doing small steps is a key. Like, if you look at a change, like writing a book means nothing. Sit 10 minutes and brainstorm titles of a book. You can do that, right? It's not, don't start with mountains, because if I start with, I'm going to climb a mountain, I'm going to stay home. There's a good chance. But if I start with, I'm going to go pick a good pair of shoes for walkers, and I'm going to go on a little hike with my friend Lauren, and we're going to chat about something, and then maybe talk to my friend who climbed a really big mountain and download, have lunch with her, or like make things a smaller bite. So when you look at them on your list, it doesn't create some sort of like too much, too big, too fast,
Yes. So breaking it down into smaller bite-sized pieces so that we can eventually climb the mountain, but maybe it takes 4 years of training.
It
And
doesn't matter as long as you're on the way, as
as
long
long
as
as
there's energy in motion towards what you want, it doesn't really matter how long it takes.
yeah, and there's also a target. There's a destination.
Mhm.
So we're not unclear on where we're actually going. What is the gap? We have to know where we're starting and where we're going, both. I love this notion too of knowing where we're at right now. So
Yeah.
it's great to take that inventory at the beginning of the year. Where am I at? And having compassion for ourselves as we take that inventory.
Yes, exactly.
I love that. So now you're here in the US and you're making amazing things happen in LA. Now you recently moved to Arizona. Tell me about writing your book. Now, is this your first book that's coming out? Talk to me about
No, it's actually the third one. It's the third one, technically, because I
Ooh,
wrote one in English and then
it's awesome.
interpreted it in French, not translated, because it's such a different culture. And so I kind of wrote it from scratch in French. No, so it's not the first one. And that is a process. There really is something to birthing. It's not an
Yeah.
accident that it takes us a while to do babies as well. It takes time, I would say the joy for me came in when I came from a place of wanting to serve and wanting to share something that was going to be helpful, because I don't know if you know my personal story, but I have lost 200 pounds
Wow.
from 360 north of 350.
Wow.
And so a lot of people struggle with that. There's a lot of people that are wanting that as a result. That's one of the most used, resolution is to get back in shape or whatever. And people think that it's going to be a superficial, the top 2 inches, like change my food or stop eating something, or it's a complex, there is a reason why someone gains weight. And often it's emotional and psychological and habits that are not very supportive. I remember years ago, like that was probably one of my shift of consciousness. These 2 women, friends of mine, I've changed their names but these 2 friends of mine, one super overweight, like 500 pounds, I'd say, really, really overweight.
Wow.
And the other one, super athletic, right? And I remember they were sitting on a bench and I'm standing in front of them and we're chatting. And at some point, the one who's super overweight says, "Oh, I'm really tired. I need to go take a nap."
Yeah.
And the other one says, "I'm tired too. That's interesting. I'm going to go for a run." And I remember thinking, wow, that's all it is. It's a habit that one, when she's tired, she chooses something that is more like a nap. When the other one, she will be given energy if she goes for a walk or goes for a run. And I remember thinking, I think it's all a matter of habits. Like when I'm sad, do I feel my sadness or do I down chocolate cake, which, will soften the edges, for lack of a better word. Like when I eat sugar, I don't eat sugar. I haven't touched sugar in 10 years, like processed sugar, maybe more. So I don't do sugar. But when I did, it was for that. There's no question. I was sad. I was angry. I was lonely. I was whatever. It's like just somehow food gave me a respite from those feelings temporarily, obviously. Like it doesn't solve anything. And so the change of habit is an exciting thing for me. Like instead of like when this happens, I do this. Well, what if I did that? Which is, the base of 12-step programs. I did one around food for a while. And it was very much that. Like when I want sugar or I feel, addicted and tempted to do something, can I call a friend instead? And then kind of maybe take care of my loneliness or have a little bit of self-love and it worked. It's like if I called a friend or if I sat there and I took a bath maybe or nurtured myself in some way, the desire for the chocolate cake was dramatically reduced.
I love that. It goes and ties into the whole person. It ties into productivity around what matters to you. It's all related. And then the habit choices drive the productivity. And yes, I can relate to maybe wanting to get a bunch of things done on a list because it'll make me feel better. And even that is, it can be like an addiction, like
it is. I mean, it boosts your endorphins. There's no question. Like it's funny because my husband tends to have reflexes like that. Like if he feels a little depressed, he'll go fix something completely not that helpful, but like doing something that now it's fixed, somehow gives him this boost. And then maybe he uses that energy to do something else. I mean, it is genuinely something that our body kind of gets, it gets a kick,
Yes. So maybe it's just being aware of it first and then being nice to ourselves. I think we should on ourselves too much and then we feel bad and then we just keep doing the behavior, right? So
Exactly.
noticing. And I didn't know that about your story. That's really amazing. And now your new book, and I know your website, we'll put it up here as well. It's becurrenttoday.com. Talk to me about what they'll find on the website, about your new book. Tell me.
So becurrent today. So they're somehow unrelated, actually. Funny enough, I mean, they're related because it's all me, and I guess it has
Yeah.
my it's all about my life somehow. But the new book is called War and Piece of Cake, and it is a take on War and Peace, of course, but being spelled differently, because there is a lot of struggles, and also a lot of triumphs, with having had this journey. And I would probably describe that I quit smoking 3 packs a day when I was 22 or something. Like, I was smoking a lot, which is also
Amazing.
very French, by the way. I started smoking when I was so young, and people, how long did you smoke? And I was like, I don't know, but by the end, I was smoking 3 packs a day. So regardless, it was too
Wow.
much. But so maybe that also is up there with like succeeding at something. But food is harder because you have to eat. Like smoking, you can
Yeah.
quit and be done with it. But of course, eating, you have to kind of let the tiger out of the cage, 3 times a day or 5 or whatever you do. So it's the story of that, the triumphs of that, the shame of it, the walking in a room and having to identify if a chair is going to support your weight or if you're going to fall on your floors, at a dinner party, and things like that, which are painful and poignant and difficult and beautiful, because the journey, I think we all, I mean, maybe you don't deal with weight yourself, but maybe you deal with, something that privately at home is difficult for you, and somehow weight shows, it's harder to hide, which probably was helpful for me because I was trying to solve this thing. There was an
Yeah.
urgency a little more because our culture, of course, treat, fat people like we should be killed or something. And so there was a lot of outer pressure that led to inner desires to solve and to heal. And it turns out it was a self-love journey, like they all are. I think we all, as humans, we come in without that capability, I think, to really appreciate what we are and who we are and who the people around us are. Like, I was thinking of that this morning. Actually, I woke up and I was at a lazy morning. It's the early of the year, and I'm not that committed this week as much as usual. And I woke up and I was just like looking at my hand, and I was like, oh my God, like, look at these. Like, look, I can actually move my fingers. Like, what?
Oh.
I mean, like, breathing and looking. And I just had a moment of just like, oh, being a human being is incredible, right?
Yeah.
It just brought me so much joy. And I think in a time where people are hard on themselves right now, I think more than maybe along the way, or maybe I'm noticing it more, or maybe this pandemic thing has kind of forced people to look at themselves a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So that's the book. The book is about, organizing conversations around. There's a documentary also that's being picked up right now by a TV channel. But it's all about how do we have intelligent conversations with ourselves, with each other, with our children. Like I meet often mothers that are dealing with, their daughters that have disordered eating is the new term, instead of eating
Right. Yeah.
because it's not always like officially, you're not always, anorexic, or there's lots in between that are
Yeah.
not necessarily. I remember when my producer, he was like, I don't really relate to this thing of food. I have a very healthy relationship with food. And the entire time we're together, he's like eating almonds from this little ball, but like the whole time. And at some point I was like, wow, you eat a lot of almonds. And he goes, oh yeah. This is what I do. 1 week out of the month, I eat whatever I want, and I get drunk, and da 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 da, and I da da da, and then for 3 weeks, I only eat almonds. And I was like, you don't think you have a problem with your food?
Sounds like disordered eating,
Oh
right?
my God, that was so funny. Like, he was like, oh, you think? And I was like, do I think? I don't know. Do you think? Like 3 weeks of almonds for a week of orgies sounds like very out of balance.
Yes, I'm not sure you feel your best when you do that. Well, we
Oh,
all have our things and our ways of stuffing emotions, or I might be really productive, or I dealt with the opposite. I was, too skinny and, quote unquote anorexic when I was little. it's all those mental gyrations when really we're just looking for happiness. We're just
Yeah,
looking
we're
for,
looking for love. We're looking for
yeah,
connection. We're looking
yeah.
for, and I think we raised, I don't know as much about children here. I mean, of course, I raised my children here, but I was already in a path of my own psychology and healthy emotional responses. And, my daughters probably would say that there was still some work to do, but hey, but certainly in France, there was so much criticism. There was, I don't know the number, but I think it's like 95 negative things we hear for one somewhat supportive thing, right? And
Wow.
so that's a lot to counter effect, as you're growing up. Don't do this, don't be that, don't say this, don't look like this, don't wear this, don't eat all day long, right? And so I
Yeah.
think part of the journey, we all have to be on it, depending on what motivates it. But I think to look back, it's a blessing. I think the fact that I remember being in therapy many years ago, maybe 20 years old I was, and this woman, I was not in self-love with my giant body. And this
Oh,
woman was like, "Do you realize how honest you are? This is so courageous. Like, you show what's broken." And I was like,
yeah.
"Oh my God." Just like sit there, like, had a sob, of like, she's right. It's very courageous and very honest and very, like I'm saying, I'm in pain, right?
Wow.
So
Yeah. Really amazing. Well, it goes with, our company is Rise Up for You. And so we love to ask everyone on the podcast as we close, what does that mean to you? What does Rise Up for You mean to you?
Oh, wow. So many beautiful things. Make choices that are loving, make choices where I put myself first, which a lot of people equate to maybe being selfish.
Mhm.
I don't. I think it's if I don't put rice in my own bowl, then I cannot do much for you, So there's something about being of service to oneself. Maybe it has to do with speaking my truth, like having to like know how to say no. Like rise up for me sometimes would probably mean saying no
Mhm.
to some things that comes in my life that I want to be liked. And so maybe I say yes, I would say
Yeah.
yes. And rising up for me would probably mean not doing that. Um, yeah, those are probably my first initial responses to
Love
this
that.
beautiful title, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Well, amazing. I'm excited to have your book come out. That is awesome. People can definitely check out your website as well. So again, that's becurrenttoday.com.
And you were asking about that. There is a cool quiz on there that is really, I've identified from working with, like I said, thousands of people probably by now, like archetypes, like what kind of producer are you? Like what makes you, like maybe if I speak kindly to you and kind of, healing kind of tone, then you'll be like, ugh. But if I talk to you with a little bit more, kind of directness, then you'll respond better to that. And it's like, well, how do you, so the quiz will help identify which of those are you, like what kind of a learner are you that way, like what gets you to do what you said you wanted to do. So that's a fun thing for people to do, is go take that quiz.
I love that. That's awesome. And we're excited to have your next book, your third basically book
Yes.
come out. Oh,
Thank
I love
you.
that. Well, Sophie, it's just great having you on the podcast today. Congratulations on your professional success, but also that deep inner journey, which definitely I'm
Thank
sure
you.
still takes that vigilance and that courage and to make those kind of changes.
Yeah, well, if we don't do it for ourselves, right, who's going to do it? So
That's
thank
right.
you. This was a fun conversation. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Absolutely. I loved it. I loved it. We did it all in English, but maybe our next one we'll do it in un poquito en
Un
español.
poquito en español sería bueno. Sí, very
I
cool.
love it. Oh, fantastic. So great to have her on the podcast. Thank you for listening or watching us live on our Facebook channel, Rise Up For You. I want to let you know that here at Rise Up For You, our CEO, Netta, and myself will be running you through a public speaking course. It's going to be amazing, a small group cohort, and you can check it all out on our website, riseupforyou.school/courses/take the stage, or text us at 949-416-0671. Text public speaking to 949-416-0671. I'm Lauren Sweeney, your host of the Become Your Best podcast and webinar series, and it's been my honor. We'll see you next time on the podcast.